Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Colin or collowollo, and I've made previous videos about weight loss tips and foods you can eat, and I kind of want to focus this little rant on some mindset tips for weight loss. Some psychological tricks that you can use or think about in order to better help you on your weight loss journey. The first one I want to talk about is the mindset of I'll eat later. I can wait. I can wait till the next meal. Um, this mindset really just comes with even if you're hungry at that time or you think you're hungry, just remembering that there's always going to be a next meal, there's always going to be a lunch, there's always going to be a dinner, there's always going to be snacks. Like maybe you don't need to eat right now, maybe you can wait. Maybe if you had a large breakfast and usually you'd eat lunch around 1 p.m., maybe you don't need to have lunch around 1 p.m. Maybe you can have a late small lunch and then a regular dinner, or you could just skip lunch and wait till dinner. um, this is something I tell myself a lot, in order to just come to a sense of being okay with, I don't have to eat right now, I can eat later. The second tip I want to talk about is, am I actually hungry or am I just bored? And I think this really is something that a lot of people who binge eat struggle with. Is a lot of times people aren't actually eating out of um, necessity or eating out of needing fuel. They're eating out of needing pleasure or a dopamine hit from unhealthy foods. And my advice with this mindset tip is, if you find yourself eating when you're not actually hungry, you're just doing it to fill time or gain some sort of pleasure. Try to find other ways to fill time or gain pleasure, such as playing sports or going to the gym or painting or watching a movie or something that can help replace that time, you know, that you would be eating when you don't necessarily need to be. The third tip I have is the mindset of I've already tried it before. I know what it tastes like. And this really comes with, I think, a lot of desserts and unhealthy foods. There's going to be a lot of times where you're out to eat with friends or out to eat with your family, or you're at Thanksgiving or you're at Christmas. And I'm not saying, don't have treats or enjoy yourself. But what I am saying is, if there's a pumpkin pie on the table and you're already maxed on calories for the day, you've already had pumpkin pie before. You know what it tastes like. You don't really need to try it. You know what you're going to be getting. Or if, like, oh, there's a chocolate cake on the table and you've already had this exact chocolate cake before because your grandma makes it for for Christmas every year. Maybe you don't need to have it this year. You already know exactly what you're going to get, exactly the feeling. So you can just kind of sit with that and be okay with it. Like, I've already had this chocolate cake before, I don't need to really try it. Um, so, yeah, the fourth tip I want to give is don't waste treats on things that aren't super meaningful. And what I mean by this is, if you're gonna eat a treat or you're gonna have a little cheat meal, if I mean, I don't really like that term, but can't really think of a better one. If you're gonna have something that goes against your diet or your calories, don't waste it on some bullshit like a Twinkie or like some Ben and Jerry's ice cream or like just some garbage like that. Use your cheat meal on something that maybe you kind of tying back to what I just said, something you maybe haven't tried before, or B, something that's actually worth it. Like, oh, you go out to eat at a restaurant and they have a nice key lime pie on the menu and you can try that. But don't waste these treats on like just junk that you can buy at a freaking gas station or a convenience store or whatever. You're never going to feel good about eating those things after, and you're almost always going to say, ah, that wasn't really worth it. Like, sure, it tasted okay, but was it worth, the damage? Rather than if you're out to eat for your birthday and you get your favorite slice of pie or cake from a restaurant, then you're really actually enjoying your treats and you're not just eating junk food to eat junk food. Um, the next tip I want to get into is being aware of delayed gratification, because your future self will thank you, and discipline is remembering what you want the most. If you can think of the future rather than what you feel in this moment, it's going to help you a lot with making smarter decisions, right? Like, if you're out to eat at dinner and there's a meal with salmon, rice, and vegetables, and and then there's a meal with a five patty cheeseburger with oil poured over it. Um, if you remember, how those two meals will make you feel after, and not only that, if you remember how those two meals will, change your weight loss journey, it's going to help you make the smarter decision in the long run. Um, and it's gonna give you that sense of thinking of your future self, where your future self will thank you. Um, the sixth tip I want to go into, and it kind of ties into the seventh tip, so I guess I'll just say them together. Is the all or nothing mindset, and the seventh tip being the tale of the tortoise and the hare. If you go into a diet or a weight loss journey with the mindset of I have to be perfect or else there's no point of doing this, you're almost always going to fail, unless you're some freak bodybuilder who has a coach that can hold them discipline, which is not 99.9% of people. If you have the all or nothing mindset, meaning if you make a mistake, you have to stop and give up and restart in a few months, that's really going to be detrimental to you, and that's what's going to hold you back. If you fuck up and you're like, oh fuck, I just ate 3 slices of cake. Guess my diet that I've been doing for the past month is over. You're really gonna set yourself back. What you should do is you should hop back on the horse. You should say, I had a bad day, but I'm gonna get right back to it. I can't be perfect. Um, ultimately you're gonna reach your goals much sooner. Um, on the flip side of that, though, if you try to say that every time you mess up, and you use that as a cop out or an escape, that's really gonna set you back also. And the seventh tip being the tale of the tortoise and the hare. So the tale goes, the tortoise was really slow and the hare was really fast, but the hare got distracted along the way with all these things. Um, it's kind of how I think about, dieting and losing weight. If you take it nice and slow and steady and you follow the proper steps and you do the right things and you don't go super extreme, you're going to eventually reach the finish line. But if you try to be the hare and you try to eat 1500 calories a day and work out twice a day, and you know like you live your whole life like that, you're almost always going to fail from burnout. Burnout's going to kill you in your journey. So always think of it as you want to be the tortoise and not the hare. Um, Tip number 8 is using food as as a source of fuel, not a source of dopamine. And we kind of talked about this earlier. You want to kind of shift your mindset when you're going from eating a bunch of crappy food to getting back on the horse of losing weight. Is you know I am I eating this because it's making me feel good, or am I eating this because it's making me feel good? Like, am I eating this to fuel my body and give myself energy and feel healthy and energetic, or am I eating this to give myself fake pleasure and dopamine and ultimately set myself back, but give myself that instant gratification? So you know you want to keep that in mind. Is the better you treat your body, the better you're going to perform, the better you're going to feel, and you know, the happier you're going to be overall. Um, Tip number 9 is don't focus on so much how much you weigh. Focus on rather how you look in the mirror. And I think this is a big discouraging factor for a lot of people who are trying to lose weight. Is so often they'll focus on the number on the scale, and they won't actually focus on how they feel, how they're starting to look better, all that stuff. They just get so focused in on the number, that they they lose faith and they give up and they stop trying, and they don't realize that it's just their body adjusting. It's just them carrying water weight. It's just what time of day they ate. It's so many different factors that you can't even begin to give that number validation. So, if after 3 weeks of dieting, you've only lost like 2 pounds and you're like, well, this isn't working, time to give up, you're just doing yourself a disservice because, you're not actually seeing it through of the steps it could take. Um, Tip number 10, this is more so a gym tip, but train like you mean it. If you show up to the day to the gym 6 days a week and you just kind of go through the motions and you lift kind of medium and you don't really try and you don't really break a sweat, you don't really push yourself, you know it's you're really, like I said earlier, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're showing up there, you're doing everything right, you're just not giving it your all. And I think it's important, when being on a diet, is to absolutely give it your all, not in a burnout way, but in a being very intentional way. So I think I think when you show up to the gym, when you go on a run, when you go on a hike, whatever you're doing, really, really give it your all. Really don't just do it half-assed. Don't just go through the motions. Intentionally be there, make an intentional choice to give yourself, the full capability of what you're capable of. So yeah. No, tip number 11 is boredom is a part of the process. You're gonna have to accept at some point that losing weight is boring. Eating healthy foods constantly is pretty boring, and it's just part of the process. Like you're just gonna have to deal with it. Sure, you can make it fun. You can make your protein ice creams. You can eat your protein bars. You can, instead of running on the treadmill, you can go run along the beach. Like you can totally make it fun, but in terms of the core staples of losing weight, a lot of it is pretty repetitive and pretty boring. And once you come to accept that, like, I'm okay with being bored. I know why I'm here today, and I know what I'm doing and what reason it's for. It's going to make the whole process go a lot more seamless. Instead of thinking everything has to be this really exciting thing, you can treat it as it's just another day. It's kind of like showing up to work. Like you just do it because you know you have to, and it's good for you. Um, Tip number 12 is, you can ignore your cravings. I feel like this goes in with a lot of addictions, whether it's food addiction or drug addiction or, whatever other kind of addictions it are is, but you can, feel your craving. You can feel the urge. You can feel what you're feeling in that moment, and you can accept it for what it is, and you can let it pass. And, you know, I think that's something that took me a long time to learn. I actually learned this pretty randomly. I learned this tip from, watching a YouTube video or something, but you can let your cravings pass. You can let that feeling of wanting a cupcake, wanting a donut, wanting pizza, whatever it is, you can let that feeling pass of wanting that junk food. And if you just wait an hour, maybe like eat a protein bar or something or whatever it is, something not totally detrimental to you, that feeling will eventually go away. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, Tip number 13 is surround yourself with people that will help you succeed. And I think this is huge because, you know, if you're an alcoholic and you go out to the bars every weekend and all your friends are people who black out every weekend, you're not you're not going to succeed very well in your journey to get sober. And it's kind of the same thing with like with eating. Like if you are around a bunch of people who don't exercise, who don't care about their body, who maybe smoke or drink a lot, who just eat a ton of unhealthy food, even if you don't necessarily want to, you're going to find yourself doing the same thing. And you're going to tell yourself at first, oh, it's just for this one time, it's just because I'm with them. And then you're going to find yourself doing it every time you're with them, and then you're going to find yourself doing it every time that you're alone. And it's really important to um, be mindful of who you're surrounding yourself with. Doesn't mean you have to switch up on your day ones, but it does mean you have to make intentional choices for the betterment of yourself. Um, Tip number 14, and we kind of already talked about this earlier, is burnout. Don't ignore burnout. Focus on recovery as much as intensity. Kind of tying this back in to tip number 10, train like you mean it. It's equally as important to work hard and train hard and show up intentionally to lift heavy, run fast, run long distances, go on long hikes, hard hikes, bike, swim, whatever it may be for you. It's just as important to train hard as it is to not ignore your body's feelings, when it's telling you it's hurting, when it's telling you it's tired, when it's telling you it's in pain. It's important to focus on recovery and sleep and stretching and, like feeling rejuvenated than it is as much as it is to, go to the gym. That's why these people who lift weights 7 days a week, I'll never understand it because I know eventually they're going to hurt themselves and they're not going to know why, but they're going to hurt themselves because they've been lifting 7 days a week for the past 2 months. And yeah, so definitely stretch, definitely sleep, a good amount, sleep enough. Um, Focus on, stretching out your limbs, your muscles, your joints, all that stuff. Um, Tip number 15 is the weekend is not a time to check out. And honestly, this is the one that I'm struggling with the most. I find myself being very disciplined Monday through Friday. I eat, at my calorie limit or around it. Right now I'm trying to eat at about 2,500. I've been averaging like 2,600. So I'm just about there. and I'll work out 4 or 5 days through Monday through Friday, and then the weekend will come, and I'm going to a concert, or I'm going to a game, or I'm going, whatever it may be, or we're going out to eat, and I find myself kind of just not caring as much. And this is definitely the one that I'm struggling with the most right now, is the weekend not being a time to check out. It's important that you know you keep the mindset of Monday through Friday that you do on Saturday and Sunday. And you can't treat it as like 2 days off. Those 2 days are equally as important as Monday through Friday. And not saying that you won't reach your goals if you're doing this, but it's definitely going to make it a lot harder, and it's going to slow it a lot down. Um, and tip number 16 is, you're allowed to be hungry, but you shouldn't be miserable. And what I mean by this is, a lot of people will automatically go from eating 3,000 calories a day to eating 1,400 calories a day, and they're like, I'm going to do this for 2 months and then I'm going to be ripped. And it's like, okay, go ahead. And they almost always fail out within a week, right? And the reason is, you're not fueling your body enough. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not giving yourself enough energy. And you're ultimately going back to the topic of burnout. You're just going to burn out from being too hungry, and then you're going to binge eat, and then you're going to wait a week, and then you'll binge eat again, and then you'll give up on your diet. And it's really important that you're eating enough, but you are eating in whatever sort of calorie deficit is acceptable for you. um, Tip number 17 is, stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. And basically, this is a fancy way of saying, stop comparing yourself to other people. Like, you see all these people on social media who are ripped and have millions of dollars, and they live in a mansion, and they have a six pack, and they're jacked, and you know like all this stuff. And you're just like, well, that's super unattainable, and I'm never going to get there, so why should I even try? And what you don't realize is, they took GLPs and testosterone and stuff to get that body. That house is rented, that car is rented, like all this kind of stuff. And even if it's not, they're just house rich and car rich. They're not actually rich. They spent all their money on impressing other people instead of keeping it to build wealth. Um, so so stop comparing yourself to other people. All you need to do is show up every day, follow the right steps, follow the boring steps, do the things that you know are going to better you for the future. Don't listen to the noise, don't listen to other people, and you'll eventually reach your goals. I deleted social media about um, a few months ago, and it's really helped me better my self image, because I'm not looking at people who are further ahead than me and comparing myself to them anymore. Um, and then my last tip number 18, is the plan has to survive real life. Life gets so busy with work and school and the gym and having friends and having a partner, and having kids and buying a house and volunteering for that thing and going to your kids' sports games, and whatever it may be. Like, there's so many things that are so unpredictable, and you get in a car crash, or your house floods, or whatever it may be. Like, these things will happen all the time, whether you want them to or not. And expecting yourself to be perfect, expecting everything to go perfectly every day, expecting you to eat the same 3 meals a day for the next 4 months, and you expecting to go to the gym 6 days a week for the next 4 months, it's probably not going to happen. There's going to be stuff that pops up. You have to go to a wedding, you have to go to a birthday, all this kind of stuff is going to pop up. And it's important that your goals and expectations have to survive real life. You can't expect yourself to be perfect, and you can't expect everything to go according to plan, but you do have to adjust when that stuff happens. And even if you get thrown off course, get back on course and stay on course. So those are kind of all the mindset tips I have. I hope that kind of helps some of you guys. If you have any other suggestions for videos you'd like me to make, feel free to drop them in the comments. And other than that, please subscribe and like and join my Discord and follow me on Twitch. And yeah, really appreciate it, guys. All right, take care.